does a liquidity event make sense? And it's like, well, before you can make that decision, if somebody shows up, a private equity company shows up with a big check on a piece of paper, you need to have an understanding of what all that means. And then once you have that, then you feed into the value acceleration methodology to say, okay, are we, do we keep going or do we exit? Do we keep going or do we exit?
The 90-day question, yeah.
The 90-day question.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider, hanging out with Andrew and Greg. I think two maybe household names in the Exit Planning Institute community. Anxious for you guys to kind of learn all about them. We were just talking pre-show. We have a theme kind of going on here with a lot of business owner stories. You maybe uniquely to these two gentlemen. Andrew's a business owner himself, but also an advisor to business owners. So I think it actually makes you even a better advisor to business owners. So I want to showcase their story. We're going to talk about your transition. We're going to talk about next generation people in your business. And I want to have the audience learn a little bit more about your models as financial advisors to business owners. But gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
If we can talk about cars and wine and golf, I probably sway his way a little bit more. Greg keeps inviting me to play golf, and I quite literally always have something going on. It's not that I'm trying to run away, but I think he won't ever invite me again if I do go, right? So that'll be he's more of a hype man than he is a golfer. So anyways, kind of start at the top. So obviously both certified exit planning advisors. Greg is a chapter president inside of our chapter network as well, and we're going to kind of dance around all of this stuff and put it all together. But you were in our office, I think you just made a random trip to Cleveland for a client, and you said, hey, can I spend some time with you? And I saw you speak at the EOS event with your partner, Tom, and as a fellow owner, your story is it was really fascinating, I think one worth sharing. And so can you take me back to the start of your firm today and maybe your transition and growth story with your dad?
Sure. And Scott, thanks to you and EPI and everything that you've done for the exit planning community. It's been really phenomenal and a great fit for us. And we really enjoy the partnership. Thanks. So, it's interesting. So, we do have a financial advisory firm inside of UBS, and we we talked a little bit about kind of our backgrounds as well in that conversation, and I think you thought it was pretty amusing that I am perhaps the only SEPA who is also a trained entomologist. So.
I know. I love this. I absolutely love this. You need to add this to your thing. Your wine, cars, and bugs.
And bugs.
And
bugs.
But I think it is. Start there, honestly, because I do remember that when we were sitting in the conference room here at EPI's headquarters. You started talking to me about your background, and you weren't really necessarily set to go into this business with your dad.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I have an older brother who's supposed to be sitting here talking to you right now, who studied finance and economics, but wound up taking a different path, actually, in the wine industry.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah.
And my father had always wanted, one of his sons to be in the business with him, and my brother was sort of the older brother, and he was the anointed one. So I studied entomology at the University of Delaware, and when my father got to the point where he was clear that my older brother was not going to join him in the business, he took me out to a fancy dinner and said, just graduate with your bug degree, and then we'll get you, into the wealth management business. And initially, it was not something I was interested in. I wanted to be a research academic. I wanted to be the Indiana Jones of the bug world.
Yeah, man.
And turned out it wasn't quite as glamorous as I thought it was. So, over time, and I thought more and more. And I had grown up. My father started a wealth management practice in Manhattan in 1973 and moved it out into Connecticut, in the mid 80s. So it had been something I was always around. I guess, kind of, it's a little bit different. Our industry is interesting because while a lot of advisors work for large companies, it's completely entrepreneurial, and you have a tremendous amount of control over how you want to grow your business, run your business, who you want to work with, what kind of clients you want to work with. So, so we got to do a lot of, he was doing a lot of, I learned a lot about it being around it. So when I finally decided it was something I wanted to do, I needed to do a little bit more learning. So he actually got me a job with a good friend of his and unbeknownst to me said, see if you can make Andrew quit. So to see if he's got, what it takes to be in the business. And I sometimes say I wasn't smart enough to quit at that point. And about a year later, I started working for my father with my now partner, Tom Mantione, who had started a few years before me. And this, Tom's background was different in that his whole life, he wanted to be in the financial services business. He started reading the Wall Street Journal when he was like 10 or 11 years old, and really liked the idea of helping people right through. And that kind of comes down to the core of it, right? Is what we do is help people make decisions that have impact on their lives that are incredible.
Yeah.
So, he and I worked basically for my father for a long period of time, all the way out until, as we grew in our roles in the team, he took a back seat to the way things were going. And I think just had a different view of the business. My dad's an old school guy, and he built a business knocking on doors and finding clients. And but he did have a tremendous amount of foresight for where the business was heading. Initially moving from a transactional type of business to a more consultative type of a business, and eventually into where we are positioned more today for helping business owners with exit transactions that really kind of change people's lives. So
exactly.
He was just not getting there quite as fast as we were. Wanted
so
to
you
get
and Tom
there.
were like, you're like, are you the visionary? Or like, is that your
Yes.
role? Yeah. So you're like shiny things, and you're like, boom, that, right? Greg's laughing.
Spot on.
But spot on, right? So you were probably, you were saying you're probably a little bit more aggressive in growth than Dad maybe was or wanted to be.
Yeah, and I think that's a big, I think we'll talk about this a little bit more, right? When you have multi-generational businesses and you have people at different levels, there's different ideas about what you want that business to be and what you want to be doing personally and what you want the team to be doing, right? So at the core of it, I think of it sometimes as almost a growth company versus a value company, or a more faster entrepreneurial company that's looking to grow, as opposed to one that's a little bit more lifestyle based, where you're in a good spot and you want to rest in your laurels a little bit, right? And that only gets more complicated when you've got family members involved.
Oh, tell me about it. Right? I'm with you, man. Yeah.
So I think we got to a point, and then we had the sort of the crucible of the global financial crisis and peaking in 2008, and then to ending kind of March of 2009, and that was incredibly impactful on our business, right? Assets were down because of market movements. Revenues were down because of market movements. Everything got a little more stressful for a while there. Sure. And Tom and I sort of figured a way forward. And my father was a little less enthusiastic about where we were going. So that was sort of the point. It was probably 2011 or so when things sort of came to a head, and we said, this is how we want to take things forward, and we basically gave him an offer to buy him out of the business. Yeah. And there was some continued negotiation from that point forward. Yeah. But and that's what happened. And after that, we were able to we had 2 years of just tremendous growth. Because we had all the great ideas for the shiny things. And then,
did you keep Dad on the board though during this time? Was there like a board or anything, or is he in the business? You give him an office still?
So he's still in the business.
Yeah.
He has not been in the office in a very long time. Yeah. And even at that point, he did not have a tremendous amount of client contact. Right. Okay. He had been more of an advisory position.
But to your point, now you can run a little bit.
We ran really fast right off the bat, and tripped and stumbled a little bit, right? And then, again, when you talk about the younger generation sometimes taking over, we have a tremendous amount of ideas. Yeah. We have experience, but maybe not quite as much experience. So, in those early years, it was now we were the ones that had to deal with, the relationships between other people on the team, the relationship between our sort of corporate parent, and we were the ones that now had to do all that stuff. Yeah. So there was a learning environment, but it was but it's been since then it's been tremendous. We've experienced a lot of growth, both of the size of our business and who we're working with, and the size of our team, and are able to really kind of have a good vision for that.
Yeah, I think it's I think I was saying to you before the show too, like owner to owner. I think it's always nice working with a SEPA who also is an owner who has done that kind of transition, and frankly, a difficult one. Just in terms of it's you and Dad. Like me and Dad are in one right now here at EPI. Right, Dad's like 20 years older than me, 25 years older than me. And we're having that push-pull a little bit, right? Like earlier this year, we announced the DriveValue.com NASCAR project. And Dad's like, whoa, that was one of those great, that was one of those shiny objects. I'm like, oh, look at this opportunity. Let's go do that. And it sounds fun because I'm kind of a car guy too. I was like, oh, this is a hobby turned into a business, turned into an educational campaign.
Sure.
And that kind of blend and balance and having to work with Dad because we're just talking about financials. Like, right, we're just he's a little bit more risk adverse. Where I'm saying like, yeah, I'll throw a little bit more out there. And so I just think that's a really cool story. The other thing that now you flash to 2024, 2025, and you have this whole young generation that was like you years ago coming into the business. You have folks like Greg. So Greg, how long have you been at this firm?
So I'm a UBS lifer so far. So I interned with a non-private wealth management team up in Concord, New Hampshire. My senior year of college. Phenomenal mentor, He was ahead of his time thinking about running it like a business, but just different business model than private wealth management. Then I was in a 2-year program out of college where I worked with all the financial or private wealth advisors in New York private wealth. Ultimately, it's a 2-year dating period of which team you ultimately join, and joined the number one team I wanted to join in Tom and Andrew. So during that time, you weren't allowed to have clients, and my brother in the NHL needed help, and there was only a year and a half before I knew which team I would join. There was something different about the business Tom and Andrew were running, and asked them if they'd help my brother, and they gratefully did. And so fast forward and joined the team in 2016, August of 2016.
Yeah. So you're coming, a couple of years away from a 10-year anniversary or so.
Exactly. Yeah. So I hit my 10-year with the firm earlier this year, but 10-year with the team in 2026.
2026. So how do you attract people like Greg into your business? I think it's like one of the hardest things for me right now as like a rapidly growing company to attract people like sitting on the other side of this glass producing the show or somebody like Sam and Paige, because they're just the next generation is just a little bit different than maybe I'm a part of that next generation in a sense, but I feel more of a fatherly figure to our folks than I am like a brother or a cousin, So
sure.
How do you make a great business like that by attracting great people?
So I think I think at the core of it, having a vision for where you want the business to go, and bringing that vision alive when you're talking to people, when you're looking to bring people on the team, when we're talking to people internally, I think that's a key part of it, right? And you've got a very dynamic, energized company here, and that's growing. And I think having that, showing that you have that vision, showing them that you have a plan for where it's going, and demonstrating that you've got their best interests at heart, right? Yeah, there's opportunities for them, and you have that whole kind of concept out there. And I think for us, we've been very thoughtful about, due to the fact that we have multi-generational clients, right? Exactly. A lot of these exits are creating multi-generational wealth.
Yeah,
and it's super important for that exiting business owner to know that their heirs and the causes and things that are important for them are going to be well cared for. And one of the ways that we do that is by having multi-generations of people on the team. So we've got our tranches in our 50s, our 40s, our 30s, and our 20s.
Yeah.
And even down to Tom's daughter, Jax, is interning for us. Right?
Oh, yeah. Cool.
So
really coming full circle.
Really coming full circle.
Like third generation, right? I mean, that's pretty cool.
Essentially third generation at that point. And still working on my boys a little bit, or my daughter. We're not sure. They're kind of thinking.
How old are your kids?
My daughter's 19, and my sons are 18 and 16.
Okay, yeah. So still trying to figure out their way through.
So 2 in college, 1 still in high school. But but I think having that, aligning, the team with the end user is really powerful. So and I think. The other thing that's different is, we like to say that we're run by owners for owners.
Absolutely.
And there's not every financial advisor or financial advisory group views their own business as an enterprise business.
I know. I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, because it's really, because you are, and you work on your business. When I saw you, you were at the EOS conference because you're running on EOS.
Correct.
Right. You're having these systems and frameworks. You perhaps run on value acceleration methodology, right? There's, as an owner, again, it's just you're like my dad, who had such a unique perspective running his own advisory firm, but at the same time advising owners how to run their companies too.
Yeah.
So, but I just think it makes it unique, because you're almost test driving what you've learned in any system that you've learned in framework on your own business.
Yeah, I think I'll add, like, that unique perspective I had with that first program out of college, where I worked with all of the advisors in New York private wealth management, right? There's a lot of really good teams from a revenue standpoint, but I think it was very unique with Tom and Andrew, where they were doing running it like a business, right? Yeah. So that entrepreneurial mindset is very, I think there's more and more advisors in our world getting to that place, but I still think it's more uncommon than you would realize across the industry.
Yeah, no, I think what I was taking from your conversation too, which I think is very true when I look at my own team, is opportunities for growth. I think that you and Tom seem like you provide, like, just kind of, again, go run. Yes. And I think of when you came to us and wanted to be a chapter president, I remember you were in Chicago, right? You're in the Chicago class. Where did you take your secret program?
I was smart. They did November in Chicago in 2017.
So maybe that's when I remember meeting you.
2016, and then I did August in San Diego.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You should have flipped programs.
I think I was 2018, August of.
Okay.
And then.
So still in person, both in person programs.
Oh, still in person.
Really the originals here.
100%.
But I remember you coming to me shortly thereafter and saying, "Hey man, like, we're in Connecticut, but I'd love to start a chapter in Michigan." I'm like, "What?
Yeah.
Like, what do you fly to this thing? Like, how do you do that?" And honestly, I think, if I'm being honest, I think I was kind of reluctant at first with you, because I was just like, that's just.
I remember walking up the auditorium at the thing and seeing you at the end of the table and talking to you right about it. Right,
because 2018 too, I would have still been pretty involved in like chapter development, because
100%.
obviously it's a cornerstone of who we are in the community.
Yeah.
And like having this guy fly in for chapter meetings just seemed like a little odd to me. But I think it's a testament to your culture that says, look, one of the things I think in hiring next generation leaders like Greg is you kind of got to let them run with cool ideas. And I mean, that's where you're from though. So it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another element to the culture and kind of how the getting next gen involved and really contributing to the team is making it clear how the work that they do contributes to the team goals, right? So we have our 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year visions. What is that person building a cash flow plan today or doing XYZ for a client? How does that contribute to that 1 year number? How does it contribute to the overall goal? And I think I had my first intern that I was in charge of recently. Like, I think
it's really come full circle for
it has,
too,
right? Exactly. Well, I think that a true leader is someone that's created a leader that's created a leader almost, right?
Totally,
so
totally
I think
agree.
we've seen that quite a bit now on the team, but the feedback from that intern when she left was like, what did you find most helpful? And she was, because I knew you explained what is the work I'm doing and how does it contribute to the overall. So I think as a team, that's a pretty unique culture thing that we have. It's not just churning out a task just to churn out a task. There's a reason behind it.
Yeah, totally. I think I like that. Like a true test of a leader is a leader who trained a leader who can now train a leader. How do you guys get your interns? Do you have is it that flow that like you came in and you get this 2-year thing and then you can get into a business? Like, how do you find interns?
I mean,
totally off script, but I'm wondering. I'm wondering because we're hiring interns right now, and it's. A lot of them just come through like our general network of people that we know.
Yeah.
But I think a good steady flow of interns is always kind of a cool thing for a business.
I think for me, it was more paying it forward. I was very fortunate enough. I wouldn't be where I am today without my internship at UBS for sure, and the skills I learned there and the mentorship I had. And I'm not able to make a significant financial contribution to my alma mater, but I think being able to give real world experience and try to help mentor students from my alma mater. So I selfishly had the captain of the women's hockey team as my.
Of course he did. Of course he did.
So that was really it was really fulfilling for me to give back to my alma mater and go at it that way. But as a team, it's good. We kind of differ.
So the other part of it, which has been significant for us, is Tom went to Fairfield University in Fairfield, Connecticut, where Greg and I actually both happen to live. Yeah. It's a great school, and he had a lot of relationships with professors there. So even when he came out and even when he started off essentially interning for my father, talking about going full circle.
Yeah, right, man. That's wild.
And was quickly going back to those professors. And once he was hired, he early on was getting interns from his alma mater. Yeah. And the interesting thing is we used to get sort of two flavors. We would get the ones that were like these really outstanding, high-flying students, and they would come in roaring, ready to go, and then a little bit of Greg saying giving back. Then we'd get the ones that the professors would say, this guy really, or this person really needs to get a sense of what the world looks like out there. Could you help him out? So we've had both of those. I lost count. I mean, we've lost count as to how many we've had going back to, kind of the mid-90s. But interestingly, I want to say 5 people on our team are all graduates of Fairfield University, maybe more even. So more. It's
so there's a commonality there for sure.
There definitely is. So some of them were interns for us and then wound up getting hired full time. So it's a process that has continued on, which is pretty helpful.
I always thought it was cool to be able to morph people into your culture because they're like they don't have an opinion yet. So right,
I was brainwashed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, all I ever knew.
In terms of like, so you guys have a way you like doing your investment management, right? Yeah. You also have the kind of EOS thing that comes into play for you guys, which I know is important, and then you have the value acceleration methodology that comes into mind. What I think, kind of owner to owner, is you take somebody like Paige, who's our director of marketing, and I tell this story a lot on the show and I think it fits right into what we're talking about. Is Paige was my first ever intern, and she's gone from intern to coordinator to manager to director, and she's one of me and my father's closest advisors today. And that all stemmed from just taking a gamble on an intern, and that was because this is going to date myself a little bit. I coached her husband in high school soccer, and he was the captain of our soccer team.
Wow.
And he went off to college. We stayed in touch and everything, and he just shot me a text. He said, hey, coach, my girlfriend at the time, right, they're in college, my girlfriend is like in marketing. He's like an engineer, right? So she's like, he's like in marketing, and she needs like an internship. And you're like a guy that owns a business. So it's like, do you think you could bring her in? And I said, perfect. I mean, for you, sure. Like, I don't know what she's going to do. But, but she came in and that was her start. So when we kind of started this conversation talking about developing as owners, developing the next generations of leaders, I think that's really cool to see, like how you could take 2 or 3 people from your team today that started just by maybe doing a professor a favor and educating them on. I think you have a very entrepreneurial mindset, right? Inside of your company. So
agreed.
I have to take a quick break. We're already flying through this thing. So I want to, after the break, for our audience, I want to come back and talk about post SEPA program. How have you modeled and evolved the value acceleration methodology into what you do for clients? So just give us a quick break. We'll be right back.
Are you a business owner seeking to unlock the true potential of your enterprise? Look no further than the second edition of Christopher Snider's revolutionary book, Walking to Destiny: 11 Actions an Owner Must Take to Rapidly Grow Value and Unlock Wealth. In this updated edition, Snider presents proven strategies for maximizing your company's value and accelerating growth. Whether you're aiming to sell or simply want to ensure long-term success, this book offers a blueprint for building a thriving, self-sustaining business. Walking to Destiny isn't just another book, it's a game changer, backed by Snider's own experience as a successful business owner and as a SEPA. This book bridges the gap between business owners and advisors, guiding you towards financial freedom. But don't just take our word for it. Hear from those whose lives have been transformed by its insights. One satisfied reader raves, "The best guide for transitioning out of privately owned companies. I recommend it to all business owners and advisors." Another praises it on its focus for maximizing business value, calling it their, quote, principal tool for educating owners. Ready to take control of your business's destiny? Visit walkingtodestiny.com now and use code EXITISNOW to claim your free copy of Walking to Destiny: 11 Actions an Owner Must Take to Rapidly Grow Value and Unlock Wealth. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Make the moment perfect by seizing this opportunity today.
Hey there, business owners. Are you ready for a game-changing opportunity? Introducing the 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report. Over the past decade, this groundbreaking research has reshaped how we view business ownership and exit planning. This report isn't just another study, it's a deep dive into the evolution of business ownership. It shines a spotlight on the crucial intersection of business attractiveness and owner readiness, revealing the undeniable impact of preparation on achieving successful transitions. With younger generations taking the reins, exit planning is taking on a whole new perspective. Education and awareness about preparing for the future have never been more crucial. And with financial readiness leading the charge, there's a clear opportunity for growth and learning. But here's the kicker. The report shows a surge in exit planning education and understanding, yet many still lack formal transition teams, highlighting the essential role of comprehensive support. So who's got your back? Trusted advisors have evolved from CPAs to financial advisors, making a decade of significant change in support networks. Ready to take the next step towards a successful exit? Dive into the Exit Planning Institute's 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report and start shaping your legacy today. The future is knocking. Are you ready to answer? Discover your readiness level at 2023ownerreadiness.com and take the first step towards a successful and significant exit.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. So now we kind of talked about you. When did you become a SEPA? 2006? 16, and then you followed a year or two.
2018.
22 years after that. And one of the other things that I really liked when last time we were hanging out, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on the show is as financial advisors, I believe you guys are really have a very unique model. And I think you got it, right? I think a lot of the wealth management, financial advisory crowd, frankly, kind of struggle to figure out where they fit in that methodology. Though to me, you know, you're kind of in the prepare gate, you have the two concurrent paths. And the top two advisors I believe an owner can have is a growth consultant that's on the business side, and a financial advisor on the personal financial side. And they're running those two concurrent paths. And for whatever reason, as we've gone, you know, kind of a volume game at SEPA, right? We've really J-curved trying to, you know, bring more SEPAs in the market and educate. They have started to struggle with, well, how do I get this really integrated? And I think you guys have a pretty cool approach. And again, sitting from an owner seat when you present it to me, I felt like when my dad presented me value acceleration for the first time, I was pretty young, but he had changed his model from buy, improve, grow, sell. It was like this siloed approach to this methodical process. And when I saw what you guys created, it was just like that aha moment where it's sophisticated enough, but it's also simple enough that the owner can understand and see the flow. So can you talk about that?
100%. So, I mean, by no means did it happen overnight. I mean,
No,
it was.
I just saw it like a year ago,
for
right?
Sure.
So
and that was probably truly, I think, after the Exit Planning Summit 2 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, when it came back
2
after
years
the
ago,
pandemic.
when it was in Arizona.
Yeah, sure.
We had our teams proven. We were already running on EOS at that time. We already had our proven process, our legacy proven process. Then I was like, wow, how do we really integrate this? So I had our process printed off, value acceleration methodology printed off, and a blank piece of paper. And how do you merge that, right? And I think it really at first comes down to, and I'm fortunate enough to get to talk to a tremendous amount of SEPAs and just from running the chapter. And anyone that you guys would like me to talk to, think about getting a SEPA or starting a chapter. And I think the biggest question is, what lane do you want to play in, right? There's a lot of people that think they can do it all.
Right.
There's a lot of things you got to know to do it all. And it's clearly a team sport, right? And so it's kind of defining what's that lane you want to play in, what's that lane you want to be really good at and specialize in, and then where are the gaps that you need to find the right people to fill out. So for us, we're very good at the personal and financial legs of the stool. Like we have unique aspects to our process around that. But to your point, there's a wealth advisor, and then there's the value advisor piece. And I think those are two very important, critical pieces that go concurrently. But knowing where that lane is and where that intersection is, how it works together, is where a lot of people struggle in my conversations.
How is it, once you kind of, Andrew, kind of adopted that way of thinking and started to truly integrate the training that you learned back in 2016, have you seen the business pivot and grow? Has it been impactful to working with owners and attracting new clients?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely it has. I think it's kind of unfortunate that business owners and entrepreneurs are probably generally poorly served by the financial services community. And that's because an enormous amount of their wealth is inside of their business.
Yeah, so you don't necessarily look like much if you take your wealth without the company.
And yes, and so, if an advisor is getting paid on a fee basis for assets, but the majority of the asset is the company, then they're not getting paid for that. So there's, as an industry, we have a lot of work to do because there is a tremendous life-changing opportunity to work with these owners. And I think, as Greg was saying, once we got that story together and could really have a conversation that essentially begins with the end in mind, right? And I think, a lot of owners don't want to talk about selling their business or exiting, right? So, but if you have the conversation in the framework of, what does their lifestyle look like? What do they want their lives to look like over time? And work backwards through a planning process to get them to a spot where you can say, okay, this is how you're running your company. This is what you're doing now. If you're going to have a liquidity event, you need to get to X in terms of your core capital to be able to live the life that you want to live without the income from the business. And I literally was having this conversation on yesterday afternoon with a new person that's come to us, and as a business owner thinking, does a liquidity event make sense? And it's like, well, before you can make that decision, if somebody shows up, a private equity company shows up with a big check on a piece of paper, you need to have an understanding of what all that means. And then once you have that, then you feed into the value acceleration methodology to say, okay, are we at, do we keep going or do we exit? Do we keep going or do we exit?
The
right?
90-day question. Yeah.
The 90-day question. And that all comes together, and getting out and having these conversations with business owners, it's sort of like, whoa, either somebody's coming in and telling them they got to sell their business right now, or it's they're not talking about it. So if you can have that conversation, once we started having those conversations, and this started to become a little bit more integrated, and Greg's done a phenomenal job of making it very visual and very, very apparent when people look at it, and it's had a huge impact. I mean, we've all seen the metrics about the tidal wave of business transitions. And so again, we're talking about transitions, right? Yeah. So as that tidal wave of transitions is coming, it definitely slowed down when interest rates went up. The Federal Reserve's attempt to combat did a good job combating inflation by raising interest rates. That really cooled off a lot of the sell-side M&A opportunities. Now it's going the other way, right? So so there's even more people coming and wanting to have these conversations. So it's been a huge growth portion of the business.
And are business owners a core focus of the practice today?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what others do you focus on? Other sectors of executives, athletes? You've talked about his brother's an NHL guy, right?
Yeah. So to some extent, when we think about sort of the legacy business, which is still very large on a percentage basis, it's a very large part of the business is our legacy business, and we're our skills and capabilities in the traditional corporate executive market and helping people like that are fantastic, right? I mean, that is a core part of the business. I think more and more people are starting to see, we talked about that younger generation, right? I don't know what number or term we're up to these days on who they are, letter. Yeah. But I think there's been a very big change in the economic structure in this country, right? So first off, the number of publicly traded companies, which is where all the smart people wanted to work, 30, 40 years ago, number of publicly traded companies has come down dramatically, right? For a number of reasons, regulations being a big part of that. Not a lot of companies are public, so there's not a lot of big publicly traded, not as many of those executives are being created. Yeah. And I think the real the real American dream is business owners, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're getting back into a period where people are, starting businesses at an unprecedented rate. So, and with the amount of private equity capital that's out there, which is a lot, this ecosystem is a huge part of our economy. So I think it would be hard not to be focused on.
I think that's like, to go back to the Weird Bee running the Michigan chapter, right? And you think about the impacts, if the stats hold true, right, from the 2013 survey, even 2023 survey, right? That's going to drastically impact that area of the country, right? How many small
100%.
businesses are in the Southeast Michigan? Right? So I think that's a big thing. And I think that Andrew touched on, and I think to your question of like the integration of value acceleration methodology into our practice, the number one Exit Planning Institute stat that shocks people, I think, to get them going is the 75% of owners profoundly regret selling just a year after selling, right? So I think to Andrew's point, that's where we spend so much time, because a lot of that stat is people, they have that desired lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, you could sell for now and get less. And well, I was just joking about getting that extra boat or buying that house. Like, no, you said it. That's clearly something that you want. And now you're going to settle. Like, and then a couple years from now, you're like, man, I really wish I didn't sell yet. I would've kept going.
Right. Exactly.
So that's a
really
big thing.
And
we can, part of our process is to show that. The next is what's next. And you think about, Andrew and I have been thinking about this a lot. We're traveling a lot together back and forth to Cleveland. But I think that third leg of the stool, the personal, right?
Yeah.
It's almost expanded of what you're going to do next. It's what's your family going to do next? I think that's and to answer the question and then the focus, like I've dedicated my career to working with owners, right? So I kind of lead the business owner effort on the team. And that's all I focus on, because I think it's really that first generation wealth creator, creating that generational wealth. How do the core values that made the first generation successful transfer on? I mean, that's where we spend a tremendous amount of time that our process flushes out. And so if we do our proven process correctly with an owner, and an owner is engaged, wanting to go through this and receptive to that, when it's time to exit, the certainty of close is much, much greater, right? Because they're going to know, what is that desired lifestyle? What number do you need to sell for to get to that? And then we already talking about how do you do that third leg of the stool? So an area we spend a tremendous amount of time on right now, and it's resonating a tremendous amount with the cases Andrew mentioned and more, is everyone trying to get a sense of what their business is worth now. So if you see a bell curve, low, mid, high, right?
Yeah, of course.
If we can incorporate that, we flush out what the desired lifestyle is, incorporate a couple cash flow plan scenarios of, all right, this is if you sell for the low, this is sell for the mid, this is what you sell for the high, back into what that number is. That's really making an impact on this community right now.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. I think particularly for that next generation of owners too, I think they're going to be like our boomerang owners, right? We're going to sell a business every 10 to 12 years, right? So there's going to be multiple liquidity events in our life. So knowing who we are in and outside of our business, I think is key, because it kind of powers our entire portfolio and allows us to do stuff again and again and again. The other thing that when I think about incorporating the SEPA model into your practice, the other thing that really stood out for me as I got to know both of you is you guys are very relationship and community oriented. And I think it's another thing that, I think it's why you mentioned the State of Owner Readiness Survey in 2023. I think over that 10-year period of time, you saw the CPA drop from the number 1 slot to the number 5 slot. And you saw the financial advisor, wealth advisor go from not even in the top 5 to the number 1 spot. And I think it's a little natural, because I think you and people like you are a lot more relationship oriented, but I think you guys have something unique. You heard me kind of maybe allude to it at the top of the show, right? Like, you like wine and cars. You have the golf thing. Tom has like the fishing. Is he a hunter too? Is he more fishing?
More fishing.
Fishing.
Very much fishing. And he's a little bit more of the wine guy than I am.
He's listening right now. He's like, come on, you should have had me on there.
Yeah,
well, he picked the wine out last night and it was pretty damn good. So I'm saying, maybe you guys have a little wine challenge next time you come to Cleveland.
Now that sounds fun.
But I think it seems why it stands out for me is that that's very intentional and deliberate. Where you guys look, where each are going to have these cool hobbies that connect to all kinds of different owners from all kinds of different parts of the country. I just think it's really cool. Can you talk to us a little bit about why make it so intentional, and how have you made it so intentional over the years? Because it has to be planned.
So I think we've always viewed, we talk about our clients as a client family, right? And because we have a multi-generational view, both internally inside the business and for our clients, either inside their businesses or after they've exited with their families, right? We spend a lot of time with these folks, right?
Yeah.
And I think, we make sure that the people that we're very careful who we bring on as clients to make sure that they're people that we would want to spend time with, because, life is short, and you need to really love what you're doing. And for us, it's those relationships are really important. So it is intentional, and I think we always knew that this was a core part of our business. And I think COVID, where for all of a sudden this line was drawn. In fact, I remember we were Tom and I were at one event with some clients in Florida on our way to fly to Arizona for another client event, a charity event that we've been involved with for a very long time. And that's when everything stopped. And, and it was, so during that period, we really had to say, okay, what do we do now? Right. And we were able to pivot and start to look at this question to say, like, okay, well, what do these people really want to talk about? Yeah. And we did all kinds of podcasts and calls, and we would talk about what's going on in markets and the economy and what's happening. And we'd get, a few people on there, and then we would do a virtual wine tasting, and we'd get, we'd have 50 Zoom squares all of a sudden, right? And we had 10 when we had our economist on, and now you had 50. Or we did do some car events virtually, which was a hard
thing to do. But hey,
we did it, and again, we were getting all these people. And I think, in an electronic distracted world, right? I think people do want to have those personal relationships. And I've always thought, if I was on the other side of this, I would want to spend time personally with my advisors, right? I would want to spend time with my financial advisor, my tax advisor, my estate planner, my SEPA, if I was on the other side of this, right? And have that personal relationship, because I think they really understand that we consciously put their interests ahead of ours all the time, right? It's client first all the time. And I think we've just found, and it's fun, right? And it's fun to share hobbies with.
Well, you think something else to add there? There's a thirst for peer share, right, in that community. And I think
I agree.
Not only with the owners, but like with the chapter that we run, right?
Yeah.
So I think with the owners too, the owners want to get that they have the sense of FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Like, what are other successful owners doing that I'm not doing, that I'm missing out on?
Yeah.
Or what am I doing that other owners aren't doing that's hurting me?
Yeah.
And I think it goes to the chapter too. I mean, I think we've kind of been unique a little bit in Michigan of the having peer share focused events long time, for years now, right?
For almost your entirety of
pretty much
always. Yeah. That's the other challenge that he gave me too. He's like, Scott, not only do I want to run a chapter that I basically had to fly to, I want to do it totally different than what you say I should do.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, you're really pushing this here. But it's actually really turned out, right? It's a model that in part that we now take across all chapters and say, look, instead of doing these like topical meetings where you have a traditional kind of lecturer standing up there for an hour, you do some of that, but then you do some peer share or case study work, and you do some socials. But on the flip side, most of the people coming to your chapters are fellow advisors, but you're taking the same concepts that Andrew was just talking about with owners and bringing them into team building. It's one of the 3 best-in-class elements of an advisor. I don't know if you knew that you were already living it, but some of the best-in-class, if you studied people that have won awards, one of the 3 things that they're doing is they've become a really excellent collaborator and a connector of people. Mm-hmm. And from a chapter standpoint and your peer shares, I think that's where my mind goes when you start talking about that.
I think I appreciate that. I think it's the same with owners though, like with that community, right? If there's the cars or the golf or the wine, that's a shared interest, but then also that's the excuse to get like-minded people together.
It is.
And then allow them to take guards down and connect, and that community, the client family, I think that is pretty unique, and people learn a lot in that, in our experience. And it's fun, as Andrew said.
Well, I know, and it's just fun. Yeah. Well, you get to just, like, I've gotten to know you in particular because I've known Greg, and John talks about him in the office almost every damn day. So, we all kind of know Greg through John. But as you start to spend more time, we've just connected. I don't, as not necessarily as an advisor, but just two guys. I'm like, oh man, he's a really cool dude. But to your point, it's fun, and so. And then you start to get there and you say, okay, maybe I can share some stuff, and you get to know me. Again, going back to building relationships. If last year at the Exit Planning Summit, we had that owners panel on stage, and I said, look, be nice to all of my members here, given they're all advisors, but I have to ask, right, as a group of 800 or so advisors, what do you look for in people like us? And they all basically said, well, they said multiple things, but all of them said two things, all in common, total theme. One, they wanted an accountability buddy. Somebody outside of their executive team, outside of their board, guys like you that they can lean into, and I can call you and you go, Scott, you didn't get that done. And I can be, I know, this is why, or maybe you can introduce them to somebody that can help me. And they wanted to be, and it goes to all of your community building and events, they wanted to be a relationship and not a transaction.
Absolutely.
And I think that even younger owners, if you look at your 50 or 55-year-old crowd and younger, they are trying to have more of a human interaction with you, not a, hey, do my taxes, do my financials, make my investments for me and keep me going along.
Well, I think I hope there's been kind of three themes of Andrew and I's answers in these a little bit, right? Where run by owners for owners. I think committed to your journey, for an owner, right? And kind of loyalty matters. So I think that loyalty matters is where we have we have some families that are 4 generations of clients,
4th generation.
So I think that's another unique aspect from that relationship. And I think that's been clear throughout our time. And I think goes back to kind of full circle, the beginning of the conversation, kind of the culture Tom and Andrew have built from the get-go.
100%. So we're hitting the top of the hour, if you can believe that already. So what is the future of the business, right? Again, going back to the State of Owner Readiness Survey stuff, I think as advisors and in this community, time is right for us. I think all boomers last year turned 60 years old or older, so I think that transition is probably top of mind. You have younger guys in their 50s and 40s and 30s that might have multiple exits. What's the future of your firm? What's the big thing next?
All right, visionary.
Yeah, vision. This could take the whole another hour.
This could be the whole thing. So the first thing I would say is that Tom and I eat our own cooking, right? Yeah. So we have a plan for the business over the next 1, 3, 10, and beyond years.
Yeah.
And I think I used to tell a joke, which my wife didn't think was funny, that when you're a financial advisor, it's a life sentence, right? There's a lot of people who stay in this role forever.
Yeah, in their 80s. Yeah.
And I could, and that happens with other owners as well. We've built and articulated an exit plan, so to speak, for ourselves, where not only do we want this business to continue to grow, and we want to give opportunities for people to grow that business and eventually take bigger roles and leadership roles, we want to make sure that all of our clients are taken care of far into the future in those successive generations. And, I'm a client too, right? Yeah, so I want to make sure we build something that is durable. So from our own standpoint, we're very, very focused on that, and making sure we're growing people into the right roles for that. So that's kind of the first thing. I think the second part of it is we just see a tremendous amount of growth in this space, and we've seen even in the past few weeks a lot of people thinking about this, and I think continuing to get this message out, which allows owners to think about it a little bit differently, and continuing to grow our team so that we can get to as many folks as we can to at least hear that message, and say, hey, here's a way to think about this. Like I said, playing the hole backwards, as some people like to say in golf, right? Like, where do you want to end up? And then use that as a method to make your decisions now, and using the value acceleration methodology. So I think there's just a huge amount of opportunity to help people through this. And that's really a way that we think about it, is continuing to build those relationships in these different communities, to be a resource for people, to at least have the conversation, right? Yeah. We might not be a great fit for everybody, but at least so people have that conversation. And I think that something that Greg had said, which has really been resonating more and more with us, and I believe as I was walking through your offices, I saw a poster with Maslow's hierarchy on it, and I, that's a big part of this, right? These exits have the opportunity to really create multi-generational, massive wealth in some cases, right? And people are starting more and more to think about, like, what does that really mean? So when you think about the third leg of the stool, and how are you personally prepared for what comes after, it's getting beyond numbers on a page, right? It's what is the next impact that person, almost like, leaders creating leaders. It's something similar that we're trying to help people with in terms of where they're going to go from that point forward, right? Yeah. They've accumulated an amount of wealth that's takes some issues off the table and puts other issues on the table.
Totally agree.
The biggest one being, how do I make sure I don't screw up my kids, right? That's a huge thing. And how do I create opportunities for them without disincentivizing them if I have some sort of a massive wealth transfer like that? Yeah. So I think that's really where the future is going, and the people are starting to think about that more. They're hearing about it more, and it's definitely a core part of what we're talking about going forward.
I think that's spot on. I think for younger families that are building that wealth too, like I think about my kids, like 10, 9, and 7. My wife was probably like, God, you got to stop hanging out with this guy, because I talk about what you just talked about. And because it's like, man, because my dad always said too, because I thought I grew up wealthy, and I was pretty well off. Like, my dad was a corporate guy, right? So he had a good salary, but then became a business owner. And I would say me and my younger sister, Ashley, lived a pretty amazing life. Always had time for a vacation, but not like I have this huge bus now that we drive in, this huge RV. Like, my dad didn't have a $350,000 bus driving around, right? He would like, him and Mom would scrape to just take us to like the beaches of Treasure Island, Florida each year, but it's like, how do I, as a perhaps owner in his 40s, and if I do come into like transformational, impactful wealth, how do I also manage my young kids who, frankly, grew up in that wealth? And it's like, because I'm not trying to raise people that don't like appreciate things. It's like a real, you're kind of a new dad, it's just a real struggle, I think, for a lot of owners.
So there's an old phrase, I don't know if you've heard it, it might have even been in your dad's book, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Mm-hmm. And almost every culture has some different version of this concept. So you've got the first generation wealth creator, who is typically, toiling in the night and focused on this thing and barely scraping to take their kids to Treasure Island.
Right.
And then the second generation comes and they kind of, they're living in the wealth, and they grow up very differently. And by the time the third generation shows up, it can be if you're not articulating your core values as a business and as a family,
right,
then you can get to a point where that third generation feels very distant from the work ethic that started everything. Mm-hmm. So it's very much everybody says, how do I make sure I don't screw up my kids? And and there's a lot of different ways to think about that. I will just say one of the most powerful is philanthropy, right? Yeah. When we can have those wealth creators, and this happens through a wealth transfer and estate process, but warm hands are better than cold ones. So having conversations that make sure that they understand that wealth is an obligation, not a right, or
Exactly.
like that more comes with it
Right.
that they need to think about.
Yeah.
So
Very cool.
interesting.
That's very, very cool. Well, gentlemen, we are definitely at the top of the hour now. So I appreciate you coming into Cleveland again to hang out with us, and really looking forward to getting more integrated and seeing you guys again over at the summit at the Sunseeker, where we'll continue to showcase the Drive Value brand as well. So a pretty cool
forward to
year.
it.
I would hope to be a part of the SIBA community, but I really appreciate you guys, all you guys do. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, everybody. We will see you on our next show, April 2nd. So please subscribe, listen, and leave a review on all of your podcast platforms, and we will see you then. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.